It was just another Monday morning, coffee brewed, dog fed, porch light off, peaceful. And then I opened the mailbox. There it was, a crisp white envelope stamped with that unmistakable seal, Pleasant Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. You know the kind? Big letters, no smile. Inside, a single-page notice, no greeting, no pleasantries, just this: you are in violation of HOA Rule 6.14, vegetative obstruction and non-uniform growth. Immediate removal of the non-compliant tree on your front lawn is required within 14 days. Non-compliance will result in a $100 per day fine. I read it twice. Then again, I wasn't angry, not yet, just confused. Because the tree they were talking about, it wasn't non-uniform or obstructive. It was Evelyn's tree. Evelyn was my wife. And if you'll allow me, let me rewind a bit. Because you can't understand the tree unless you understand her. We bought the house together in 1992. Just married. She loved the wraparound porch. I loved the quiet. It was small, nothing fancy, but to us, it was the world. The first thing she planted was that tree, a red oak, barely 4 feet tall. She watered it every day like it was a child, named it Grace, after her grandmother, said it made the front lawn look anchored. By the time we hit our 10-year anniversary, Grace was shading the entire porch. By our 20th, kids were hanging swings from her branches, and when Evelyn passed away in 2017, breast cancer, fast and cruel, that tree became something more. I didn't decorate it, didn't hang things on it, I just kept it company. Sometimes I'd sit on the porch and just watch it sway in the wind, like maybe somehow she was still in there, watching with me. So yeah, when I read that letter, I didn't just see a rule violation, I saw an erasure, and that made my blood boil. I called the HOA the next day. The phone rang 8 times before someone picked up. Pleasant Ridge Association, this is Pam. Pam, the one with the customer service voice that could cut glass. I explained the situation, told her the tree had been there for 30 years, told her it wasn't hurting anything. She didn't care. It's been reclassified due to recent guideline updates, new landscaping alignment policy passed by the board last month. I asked if she'd seen the tree. No, but I can send someone. Please do. She didn't thank me, just hung up. 2 days later, I noticed a clipboard guy on my lawn, khaki shorts, polo shirt, HOA badge. He didn't knock, didn't say hello, just walked around the tree, scribbled something, took a photo and left. I waved at him from the porch. He didn't wave back. The next morning, I got another envelope. Violation confirmed. No explanation, no grace period, just a revised deadline. Tree removal required by Friday? And that's when I realized they weren't just issuing a warning, they wanted it gone. Now I started doing my own research, pulled out the HOA handbook, cross-referenced Rule 6.14, tracked every meeting agenda they'd posted for the past 6 months. Guess what? There was no mention of a vote, no community feedback, just a single sentence added to a March bulletin. New aesthetic uniformity protocols in development. That was it. No transparency, no warning, and yet somehow my tree was first on their list. But then something strange happened. My neighbor Karen, the one who never talks to anyone, showed up on my porch holding her phone. She said, "They're doing it to me too." Her violation, a row of lavender bushes planted 3 years ago, suddenly deemed non-standard vegetation and visually dissonant with neighborhood theme, whatever that means. 2 other neighbors got citations that same week, one for excessive vine growth on a backyard fence, another for a Japanese maple that clashed with surrounding foliage. It was clear now, this wasn't about grace or aesthetic harmony or even property value. This was about control, and they had decided it was their turn to tighten the reins. I emailed the board, no response. I attended the monthly meeting, they wouldn't let me speak, said I hadn't submitted a request to be heard 10 days in advance. I was sitting in a chair not 10 feet from them, and they just moved on like I wasn't there. But you know what they did approve at that meeting? A $12,000 contract with a new landscaping company. Guess who owns it? The HOA vice president's cousin. Nice and cozy. At this point, I was done being polite. I reached out to a local arborist named Terrence, older guy. knows trees like most people know football. He came by the next day, walked around Grace slowly, touched her trunk, examined her roots. After 20 minutes, he turned to me and said, "This tree's healthier than half the neighborhood." I smiled. Then he frowned and said, "But someone's trying to frame her." I blinked. "What do you mean?" He pointed to the base of the trunk, a spray of orange marking paint, the kind used to flag removal. "This isn't city work," he said. "This is private. Someone's trying to make it look official." That was the final straw. I contacted a lawyer, not Angela this time, she'd moved to DC, but a younger guy named Malik who specialized in property law. I told him everything. He nodded calmly, took notes, and then said the most beautiful sentence I'd heard in weeks. "This is winnable." We filed a formal cease and desist against the HOA. They responded by doubling the fine. Then I got another letter, this time from the landscaping company. Scheduled removal, Friday, 9 a.m. They were going to send a crew to cut down Grace, just like that. I called them immediately. "Sorry, sir," the voice said, "we have a signed authorization from the HOA president." I asked if they had a court order. They did not. So I did what any man would do when facing the destruction of the last living memory of his wife. I stood guard. That Friday morning, I sat on the porch at 8 a.m. with a thermos of coffee, a lawn chair, and the original property deed showing that Grace predated the HOA itself. At 9:12 a.m., a white landscaping truck pulled up. 3 men stepped out. One looked at me. I looked at him. He said, "You the homeowner?" I nodded. He looked at the tree, looked back at me, and said, "We're not touching that without a court order." They left, and I finally exhaled. Later that day, I noticed something new on my lawn, a fresh sign staked just a few feet from the tree. Printed in all caps, notice, non-compliant structure, subject to enforcement action. They were escalating, and I knew it was time to strike back. Malik filed a petition for emergency injunction. We attached photos, reports, HOA meeting records, property dates, everything. The court accepted it, hearing set for next week. But that wasn't all, because something unexpected happened that weekend. Karen, my quiet neighbor, came by again, but this time, she wasn't alone. She brought 10 other neighbors, all holding copies of their violation letters. We sat in my living room for 2 hours. We shared stories. Turns out some had been fined for holiday wreaths, bird feeders, welcome mats. One woman had been cited for a wind chime. A wind chime. They weren't just targeting non-uniform trees. They were targeting personality, color, individuality, grief, joy, memory. So we formed something right there in my living room, a little group. We called it the Rooted Resistance, because yeah, it started with a tree. But now, it was about something bigger. This was about digging in. By the time Monday rolled around, our living room had transformed from a quiet sitting space into the unofficial war room of Pleasant Ridge Estates. Fold-out chairs, clipboards, notebooks. Half the neighbors were retirees. The other half were working parents, but all of them mad as hell, not just at the tree violation, at the feeling that their own neighborhood was turning on them. Karen was our unofficial treasurer now. Doug from Lot 17 became the logistics guy. And Miss Reba, the 73-year-old firecracker with a Yorkshire Terrier and a thing for bourbon, well, she declared herself Director of Emotional Damage Recovery. She also made the cookies, burnt but sincere. By Wednesday, we'd tracked down 12 total residents with current citations, all different, all vague, all delivered within the last 60 days. That wasn't coincidence, that was a pattern. And the most telling part? Every single one of those residents had previously opposed the HOA board's vote last year to raise dues, every single one. That's when Terence, our arborist, came by with a folder. Inside were 2 documents, a signed letter from 1994 stating that the oak tree located at lot number 28 is permanently grandfathered into landscape allowances due to its establishment date predating HOA guidelines. A root inspection report that concluded Grace's root system was non-invasive, stable, and compliant with city code. He smiled. I can call her ugly, but they can't call her illegal. We forwarded those documents to Malik. His response? 2 words. Game on. Hearing set for 2 weeks later. But in true HOA fashion, they didn't back down. Instead, they played dirty. 3 days after the injunction was filed, I got a notice from the city, not the HOA, the city, saying my property was being investigated for potential soil grading inconsistencies that may affect drainage compliance. I called the listed department, spoke to a man named Dennis, nice guy, sounded exhausted. I asked him who filed the report. He paused, then said, I probably shouldn't say this, but it came from someone on your HOA board, not the city. I hung up. And for the first time, I didn't just feel frustrated, I felt targeted. This wasn't about a tree. This was about punishment, about silencing the guy who fought back. And I was done playing nice, because now the question wasn't, can I save my tree? It was, how deep does this corruption go? We doubled down. Karen started digging into financial records. Kind you can request from any HOA if you know how to ask. She found a $2,400 charge labeled consultation retainer. Guess who it went to? The landscaping company that had marked my tree. No approval vote, no notice to members. Just a quiet check, paid from community dues. Doug, meanwhile, found a Facebook post from last year where the HOA president joked about finally getting rid of the jungle tree. And Reba? Reba knocked on the president's door and asked if she could hang a piñata in her front yard, just for fun. He slammed the door in her face. She considered that a victory. With everything gathered, Malik put together a witness packet for the hearing. Terence, the arborist, would testify. So would Karen, and so would I, but then something unexpected happened. Someone from the inside reached out. Her name was Leah. She'd joined the HOA board last year, thinking it'd be a fun way to meet neighbors. She emailed me privately and said, this wasn't what I signed up for. I tried to speak up, but they shut me down. They don't want compromise, they want obedience. I asked her to meet us. She showed up that Sunday, no makeup, hoodie, nervous hands, but when she sat down, she brought gold, meeting notes, chat transcripts, internal emails. One in particular stood out. It was from the HOA president to Pam, the same Pam who took my call weeks ago. Subject, Initiative number 9, message. Start with lot 28. Tree removal sets the tone. Once it's down, the rest will follow. I stared at it, then I laughed, a bitter, disbelieving laugh. They're calling my wife's tree Initiative number 9? Leah nodded. They think if they can knock you down, no one else will fight. So we decided to show up louder than ever. The hearing date arrived, small courtroom, just 3 rows of seats. Judge Kramer on the bench. Old school, straight posture, reading glasses halfway down his nose. The HOA showed up with a lawyer. I showed up with half my neighborhood. Doug wore a Rooted Resistance t-shirt. Reba brought cookies. The judge did not take one. Our case was first. Malik opened with calm precision. He outlined the tree's history, its health, its significance. Then he handed the judge the 1994 grandfathering document. And then came the real punch, the leaked HOA emails, the city complaint report, the landscaping contract with no vote, the Initiative number 9 plan. The courtroom was dead silent. Then it was their turn. The HOA's attorney tried to focus on aesthetic standards and collective neighborhood interest. Judge Kramer cut him off. Sir, this homeowners tree predates your association. You don't have the legal authority to remove it. But, and these fines? The judge said, flipping through the paperwork. Excessive, retaliatory, and bordering on harassment. You could feel the room tilt. Even the lawyer seemed to shrink. The judge leaned forward and asked me directly, "Do you want damages?" I thought about Evelyn, thought about the spray paint on the trunk, thought about the fine letters. Then I shook my head. "No, Your Honor, I just want the tree left alone." He nodded, then gave the verdict. The HOA is hereby ordered to cease all enforcement actions regarding Lot 28's front lawn tree, all accrued fines avoided, and the association is instructed to revise its enforcement protocols with full member transparency within 90 days. Bang, gavel, done. The HOA lawyer slinked out. Pam wouldn't look at me. The president left without a word. And outside, we cheered. Not loud, not obnoxious, just proud. Because sometimes winning isn't about gloating, it's about getting your dignity back. But we weren't finished. We went home, and 2 days later, we held our own meeting on the lawn under grace. No agenda, no violations, just neighbors talking like neighbors again. And the final surprise. Leah stepped down from the board and ran for president in the next election. She won unanimously. The next spring, we built a little bench around Grace. Simple wood, one line carved into the edge, rooted in memory, protected by community. And every now and then, I still sit there, coffee in hand, wind through the leaves, dog curled up by my feet. And I think, all of this? Because of a tree? Peace doesn't return all at once. It comes in layers, like sunlight after a storm. Soft, scattered, uncertain at first. After we won the court case, things in Pleasant Ridge Estates slowed down. Fewer envelopes, fewer angry neighbors, fewer threats disguised as policy. But just like old vines on a fence, the HOA wasn't done growing in the dark. It started with whispers. Small changes. Quiet ones. The HOA board, now down 2 members after the lawsuit fallout, appointed replacements without a vote. That was red flag number 1. Then they rebranded their newsletter. Instead of the usual Pleasant Ridge Monthly, it came in a glossy, reworked edition titled PRE Living Order. Beauty, community sounds harmless, right? But page 3 featured an article titled Aesthetic Integrity, Why Standardization Keeps Our Neighborhood Valuable. And the photo right next to it? A subtle shot of a front yard, not mine, but 2 doors down, Karen's place, her lavender bushes, still blooming, still defiant. It was their way of warning us, we lost the court case, but we're still here. Karen showed me the newsletter the day it arrived. She didn't speak, just handed it to me, tight-lipped. I read the article twice, then I sat down and said, "They're baiting us." She nodded. "What do we do?" I looked at the photo again and grinned. Same thing we did before. We called another meeting. This time it wasn't just the Rooted Resistance crew. 40 neighbors showed up. Some brought folding chairs, others stood. Some were new faces, people who'd kept their heads down during the tree battle. But now, they were ready. Doug opened with a slideshow. Yes, a slideshow. He'd been tracking every HOA policy update since the court case, color-coded, highlighted. One phrase kept appearing in the minutes: administrative realignment proposal. It sounded boring, but what it really meant was this: they were trying to change how board members got elected. Right now, every resident had 1 vote. Simple. But the realignment would give extra weight to residents with compliance records in good standing. Translation: if you hadn't been fined or cited in 12 months, your vote counted double. And if you had been cited, even for a flag, a wreath, a wind chime, your vote would be downgraded. Angela, our former lawyer neighbor, who had just returned from DC for a short visit, summed it up best. They're trying to rig the democracy. If they control who votes, they control who wins. Period. So yeah, we had beaten them in court, but now we had to beat them at the ballot. We got to work. Karen created flyers. Doug posted updates in every neighborhood Facebook group and Nextdoor thread. Reba, never to be underestimated, went door to door collecting signatures for a petition to block the vote waiting proposal. She also brought muffins. Even the people who disagreed with her signed just for the muffins. And then, out of nowhere, Frank came back. Yup, Frank, Mr. Initiative Number 9, Mr. Garages Only, Mr. Chalk Drawings are a menace. We hadn't seen him since he resigned in disgrace after the tree case, but suddenly there he was, at the next board meeting. New haircut, new suit, same smug face. Apparently he'd been appointed as Community Strategy Consultant, which is HOA speak for we're bringing back the guy who tried to ruin everyone's lawn. His first move? A public address. He stood up at the meeting and said, "The time has come for Pleasant Ridge to evolve beyond petty conflict. We must embrace structure, not chaos. No one clapped. He continued anyway. This new voting proposal will bring fairness, responsibility, and it will reward those who truly care about our community's standards. Rachel, sitting behind me, whispered, "Does he mean the people who fined kids for sidewalk chalk?" I didn't answer, because I was watching the room, and something interesting was happening. People weren't angry. They were tired, worn out. And that's dangerous, because tired people stop fighting, they stop caring. And that's when people like Frank win. So I stood up, not angry, not loud, just calm. I said, "Frank, when you tried to destroy a tree planted by my late wife, you said it was about standards. When you fined Karen for lavender, you said it was about harmony. But let's be honest, this was never about plants. It was about power." He rolled his eyes. I continued, "If this vote passes, Pleasant Ridge won't be a community anymore. It'll be a ranking system, a hierarchy based on obedience. And that's not why we moved here." Silence. And then from the back, Reba's voice, "Preach, baby." We held the actual community vote 2 weeks later. Normally, maybe 30 households participate. This time, 94. We camped outside the clubhouse all day. Coffee, music, kids with handmade signs that read, "Let us vote fair." And when the final tally was announced, realignment failed. 71 to 23. Frank left quietly. Again. Now you might think that was the end of it. But here's where the story shifts, because beating the HOA wasn't enough anymore. We had to rebuild what they'd broken. We started small. Karen led a landscaping committee, but instead of enforcing uniformity, it celebrated diversity. Front yard gardens, approved. Painted rocks by the sidewalk, encouraged. Solar lanterns, absolutely. Doug created a newsletter, an honest one, and titled it The Roots Report. Leah, now HOA president, held monthly coffee meetups on Saturdays. No suits, no agendas, just neighbors. And the best part? We changed the bylaws, not to add restrictions, but to limit power. Any policy change now required a 75% resident vote. Fines could not exceed $25 per day. Appeals were automatic and mandatory. In short, we rewrote the rules to protect the people. Then something unexpected happened. A neighborhood 2 cities over, Briar Glen, reached out. They'd heard about our battle, our reforms. Their HOA had just fined a disabled veteran for painting his wheelchair ramp too bright. They wanted help. So we shared everything, documents, flyers, meeting strategies, even the muffin recipe. And that's when I realized this was bigger than Pleasant Ridge. I started a simple website, nothing fancy, just a resource hub, called it Leaves of Change. People began sending in their stories. One guy in Texas got fined for planting milkweed to help butterflies. A woman in Georgia was threatened for her pride flag. An elderly couple in Arizona had to fight just to keep their 20-year-old front yard cactus. Every story different. But the theme? Power versus peace? Control versus community. I added a map to the site. Every time someone pushed back and won, I added a tiny green tree icon. 6 months in, the map was full of trees. One night I sat under Grace, Evelyn's tree, and looked at the stars through the branches. I thought about how it all started. A letter, a threat, a simple refusal to back down, and now that refusal had echoed. People sometimes ask me why I didn't just cut the tree down and move on, why I went to court, held meetings, started a website. The answer is simple. Because I knew I wasn't just protecting wood and bark, I was protecting a memory, a promise, a principle. And those? They're worth more than anyone's idea of aesthetic integrity. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Every time you think you've won, someone waits for the next storm. In our case, that storm came, literally. It was late August, the kind of week where the air hangs heavy and the weather app lies to your face. Forecast said light winds. What we got? 65-mile-per-hour gusts, power outages and fallen branches across 4 zip codes. They called it the microburst. Locals called it Hurricane HOA Because, of course, it wasn't just nature that showed up that night. It was the board. The next morning, I stepped outside to check on Grace. The storm had done its damage. A few large limbs cracked, leaves scattered like a green carpet across the lawn, but she was still standing, still proud, still rooted. I was sweeping up the walkway when I saw it, a small orange tag stapled to the trunk. Hazard, subject to emergency removal. My heart sank. Not again, not after everything. 2 hours later, a white city truck pulled up. The driver got out, clipboard in hand. "City arborist," he said. "Got a removal order for this tree." I showed him the court documents, the old inspection report, the signed 1994 exemption. He studied them, nodded, and said, "This isn't us. This order didn't come from the city." I blinked. "Then who?" He scratched his head. "HOA must have called it in under our name. That's illegal." He got back in the truck and drove off. By noon, I had 3 calls. Doug, Karen, Leah, each telling me the same thing. They tagged our trees too. Turns out, after the storm, the HOA issued a blanket emergency landscaping directive. No vote, no notice. They claimed the storm had made numerous front yard trees unstable and used it as a loophole to bypass normal protocol. Their plan? Mass removal. They'd hired a new company, one that didn't ask questions. Trucks were scheduled for the weekend. And Grace was at the top of the list. They couldn't beat us in court. They couldn't change the vote. So now, they were trying to use nature itself to finish what they started. We had 48 hours, that's all. 48 hours to stop a chainsaw from cutting through 30 years of memory. I called Malik. He was already drafting a cease and desist. But this time, we needed more than legal muscle. We needed eyes, we needed bodies, we needed the whole community. Fast. Doug made a flyer, bold red letters. "Tree removal alert. HOA strikes again." Karen posted it on every digital board she could find. Leah printed 150 copies and went door to door. By sundown, my lawn was full. Teenagers, parents, retirees, kids holding signs. One said, "Leave her alone." Another, "You mess with one, you mess with all." We called it a tree watch. Day and night, people rotated shifts. Rachel set up a cooler with snacks and water. Doug brought a generator and string lights. Karen brought camping chairs. And me, I stayed on that porch, watching, waiting, listening to the wind rustle through what was left of Grace's canopy. At 5:43 a.m. Saturday morning, we heard the rumble. A flatbed truck. Yellow beacon lights pulling a chipper, the removal crew. 3 men stepped out, looked at the crowd, then at the clipboard. One of them, young guy, maybe 30, walked up to me. "You the homeowner?" I nodded. He looked at the tree, then back at the crowd. "You all gonna block this?" Nobody moved. He took a deep breath and said, "Then we're not cutting." The crowd cheered. They packed up and left. 30 minutes later, the HOA president arrived. Suit, sunglasses, clipboard, fury. "This is obstruction," he said, voice shaking. "This is community," Rachel replied. "You're all violating safety code." Karen stepped forward. "Then call the police. Let them decide." He didn't. He stormed off. And as he drove away, Reba, holding a megaphone she somehow acquired, shouted, "Say hi to Frank for us." We didn't just stop Grace's removal that day, we stopped all of them. The arborist inspection the HOA had claimed, faked. We contacted the city again. This time they launched an internal inquiry. Turns out the HOA president had a friend in a private firm write up a fake emergency tree risk report. They tried to pass it off as municipal forgery, fraud, fines. Within a week, the HOA board was dissolved. Every member resigned. One was sued by the city. And just like that, the storm that was meant to destroy us was the very thing that saved us. In the aftermath, we formed something new. Not an HOA, a neighborhood trust, voluntary, open books, no enforcement officers, no secret meetings, just a group of residents who care enough to talk, vote, and disagree with respect. Leah stayed on as coordinator. Karen led beautification. Doug? He ran tech and transparency. Even Reba got her moment. Some endings aren't explosive. They're quiet, like the slow return of birds after a storm. like wind moving through leaves that almost weren't there. It's been 8 months since the last battle. 8 months since Grace was nearly reduced to mulch. And now? Now things are different. Not perfect, but different. There's no HOA anymore. No letters, no fines, no threats. Just people talking, figuring it out together. We call ourselves the Pleasant Ridge Collective now, a fancy name for a not-so-fancy idea. Neighbors looking out for each other. No dues unless you want to contribute, no penalties, no secret votes, just one monthly potluck, one newsletter, and one very strict rule: no nonsense. Karen's lavender bushes have doubled in size. She added solar lights, tiny garden gnomes. Nobody complained. In fact, the community voted to feature her yard on the cover of the fall newsletter. Cover line? "Bloom where you're planted," she cried when she saw it. Didn't admit it, though. Said it was just the pollen. Doug's now organizing a front yard art walk. Once a year, families decorate their yards however they want. Murals, sculptures, chalk, light shows. One guy built a cardboard spaceship. Another turned his yard into a dinosaur tea party. Not every piece was a masterpiece, but every yard had something to say. And more importantly, no one was afraid to speak anymore. And Reba is now legendary. Her Reba Roast and Root Festival drew over 300 people from surrounding neighborhoods. Live music, muffins, a community drum circle. She even got interviewed by a local radio station. When they asked what started it all, she said, "A tree, a stubborn man, and a bunch of neighbors tired of being told no." As for me, well, I still sit on that porch most mornings. Coffee, blanket, dog, watching the world tilt into light. Grace has grown stronger. The limbs we braced have healed. The bark has thickened. The roots are deeper than ever. Every now and then, someone new in the neighborhood walks by and asks about her. And I tell them the story. Not the legal battle. Not the court hearing. Not even the HOA's fall from grace. I tell them about Evelyn. How she planted it with bare hands. How she talked to it like it was alive. How she believed that putting something living in the ground was the most hopeful act a person could do. She used to say, "Trees are time capsules. You plant one, and one day someone will sit under it and wonder who put it there." Now, people don't wonder. They know, because right next to Grace is a small plaque. Bronze. Simple. It reads, "Grace, planted by Evelyn James, 1992, protected by neighbors, 2025, rooted in love." And something even more incredible happened last month. The mayor's office reached out. Turns out word of the lawsuit and everything after had reached the city. They wanted to feature Grace as part of a new urban canopy heritage program. She's now one of only 12 trees in the county officially protected by city code. No one can touch her, not a board, not a landscaper, not even me. She's no longer just a tree, she's a landmark. But here's the part I didn't expect. The real change wasn't in Grace, it was in us. We used to be strangers. People who nodded from driveways and closed our doors behind us. Now, we eat together, we disagree together. We fix each other's fences and celebrate birthdays and mourn losses. We became what the HOA never managed to be, a community. Not because of rules, but because of resistance. Because when you've fought for something, really fought, it becomes more than a lawn, a rule, or even a tree. It becomes shared ground. I remember the day we buried Evelyn's ashes. We didn't go for a headstone. She hated marble. We scattered some beneath Grace. I told no one at the time, but when that tree was marked for removal, when they tried to rip it from the earth, it felt like they were trying to erase her all over again. That's what this fight was always about. Memory, connection, roots. A few weeks ago, a young couple moved in across the street. Just married, first home, fresh paint smell and mismatched furniture. They knocked on my door with a plate of cookies, Karen's influence clearly, and asked me, "Hey, what's the deal with the big tree across the street? Everyone says it's famous." I smiled. "Depends who you ask." They looked confused. So I told them everything. The storm, the court, the protest, the plaque. They stood in silence, staring at Grace. Then the woman said, "That's kind of beautiful." I nodded. "She is." Then I added, "And she's yours now too." Because that's how it works, doesn't it? You plant something in love, you fight for it in grief, and someday someone else gets to rest in its shade. We've started planting more trees now. Doug started a plant forward program, a tree per house, each one chosen by the homeowner. Karen picked dogwood, Reba planted a fig, Rachel chose magnolia. And me? I just sat back and watched as little saplings poked their heads out of the ground, watched kids dig with plastic shovels, watched old men pour water and smile like children, because the fight wasn't just to keep a tree, it was to remind people they had a right to grow. Every year, on the day Evelyn died, I sit under Grace with a cup of coffee and a folded lawn chair. I don't cry anymore, I just sit, breathe, remember, and when the wind moves through her branches. It doesn't sound like grief, it sounds like legacy. So if you're ever walking through Pleasant Ridge and you see a tree with a wooden bench at its base, stop for a moment, take a seat, close your eyes, you'll feel it, that quiet strength, that soft defiance, the whisper of roots saying, "You belong."